Hi everyone, it's Phil from Ashland Leather, and I've got some very exciting limited release belts to show you today. The first belt that we're going to look at is a really interesting one here, made out of Epic Splatter Reverse Blue Shell Cordovan. All of our shell cordovan belts are made out of 3 segments of leather, and that's because each piece of shell cordovan is not long enough to make one single length belt. And you can see the joints that we've placed here. There's one there and one here. And our joints are a little bit different than how some other places do it, where they lay a piece of leather over the top. We've seen complaints from people in the past saying that that segment starts to delaminate a little bit. So our construction method here fully avoids all that. One of the other really cool things, especially given it's the 120th anniversary of Horween Leather's existence, is we've brought back shell cordovan to its roots. So shell cordovan was originally tanned at Horween Leather Company here in Chicago in 1905, and it was used in razor strops. So they would take one side of the razor strop, the shell cordovan side, to hone the blade, and then the back side of that razor strop would be exactly the same leather that we have here. And this is another piece of horsebutt leather. So the idea would be that you would hang this up on the wall, although not in belt form, in razor strop form, and you would sharpen on the back side here on the horsebutt strip side, and then hone the blade on the shell side. So we're sort of bringing shell cordovan back to its roots and hinting at the past here with the design of these belts. And there's a couple other little details that I like about our belts is we have these teardrop shaped holes, which makes it a little bit different. There are 7 of them, and each belt is sized to the middle hole. So this one right here will be fit to a size 38. One of the other things that we like to do on the belts is hand stain the edges. Not all of them today have a hand stained edge, but this one has a blue hand stained edge to go along with that Epic Splatter Reverse Blue Shell Cordovan. And I have a few non-shell cordovan belts that are extra funky. This one here is also a horsebutt strip. So these horsebutt strips are tanned alongside the shell cordovan. So you get similar veg tan character, but it's not the same dense fiber layer that the shell cordovan is. And then the very obvious difference on this specific belt is that really funky embossing. I'm not sure what to call it, embossing or debossing, but this is a texture that the tannery presses into the leather. And I remember about 15 years ago when the tannery acquired maybe 100 different embossing plates. And I remember bringing them inside the tannery with Skip Horween, looking at all the different textures, and we were sorting out what would be usable. This was one of the ones we actually chose, and I don't think it's been used in those 15 years until today. So this texture is actually called the brand texture. So all of these different patterns in the texture are different symbols or brands that ranchers use for their animals in the field, and they're sort of all mixed together here in one big long impression. So it's definitely funky and different. I put up a post on Instagram and YouTube Shorts earlier this week, and it seemed like people are really curious about this texture. And that makes me, as well as Skip, really happy because we weren't sure if people would like this. So this texture is maybe not for everybody, but I certainly think it is very unique, and you'll definitely have a one-of-a-kind belt with this one. So we have another version of that same brand print here. The only difference on this belt, it has been stitched along the outside, so it gives it a little bit more of a refined look. And then I have another one that's sort of a Skip request as well. This is a leather called Horween Dublin. So again, tanned with the same tree barks as shell cordovan, although not in the pit. And this is done on bovine, specifically steer hides. You notice the texture on this is also very wood-like. It almost looks like wood grain. And this is a pretty neat texture. It's pretty natural appearing as opposed to that brand texture. And that's because this has been boarded. So you might ask, what is boarding? And boarding is a very old school method for either softening out leather or creating a texture just like this. The way that it is achieved is when you fold the leather back in on itself like this, apply a little bit of texture, and traditionally with a long board, and then roll it backwards like this. And that's how all this little bits of texture happens. What you're really seeing there is a delamination of the grain layer separating out from the fibers below. But the effect is certainly cool. It gives it a very nice tipped look. So the peaks of the texture a little bit darker and the valleys are a little bit lighter. And I have another one of the same hand-boarded pieces here, hand-boarded natural Dublin leather, although this one is also the stitched variant. All right, back to shell cordovan. I've got some really cool Western texture shell cordovan belts to show you with the same veg tan liners. The first one here is navy shell cordovan which is a really nice dark blue shade, again with that Western texture. And on this particular belt, we have a black buckle on it, which is different than all the rest in the drop today. Everything else has an antique brass finish. And here's another one with the Western texture, shell cordovan again. This time I believe this is color number 4 shell cordovan. And there's an interesting thing that happens when the shell cordovan or most leathers get embossed with the texture is the color seems to change very slightly. Often I notice it gets a little bit lighter. So in the case of this one, color 4 is slightly less dark than the traditional color 8. I read color 4 as more of a medium brown with reddish undertones. And this is our first example with the natural waxed and burnished edge. Here's another belt with that same natural waxed and burnished edge. This time we've got Western Amaretto shell cordovan. Now Amaretto shell cordovan, if you've been following the channel for a bit, for the years and years here, I've been saying is my favorite shell cordovan color, and it is still my favorite shell color. It's kind of like a more interesting version of natural shell cordovan to me. It reads a little bit more yellowy and orange when compared to the natural shell, which has a little bit less vibrance to it. So I just find the Amaretto to be a little bit more striking for my taste at least. But the truth is, both natural and Amaretto, after a few years of wear, they're probably going to look about the same color. Everything, especially a veg tan leather, tends to want to go darker and tends to want to go a little bit more golden and brown in color. And that's, again, true for all veg tan leathers, including the shell cordovan. Now, so here's some really fun stuff. This is all reverse black shell cordovan, and we were able to cut the Horween ink stamp into the center of the back of this belt. So when you put this one on, that ink stamp is right in the center. The other fun detail is we're able to cut the ink stamp onto the keeper there, which I think is really fun. But let me show you what I'm talking about with the center on the back. So here is how the belt would look. You got the ink stamp right in the center. This is also a good chance for me to show you the 3 pieces of leather. We designed this so these joints would sit nicely on your hips and also have this long piece, the longest piece, be centered across your back. And we did this for comfort, but also for the design, because again, the shells are just not long enough to make one continuous piece of leather go along all the outside. We've got another one here in the same vein as the reverse black. This is reverse ultraviolet shell cordovan. In the shop here over the last week or so, as we've had the belt sitting on our rack, this has been the belt that stood out to most of our visitors that have come into the shop. This one is very striking in person. Definitely more of a pink shade. There's the reverse side of the ultraviolet shell cordovan. We've got the same idea here with the ink stamp on the back. This one also has an additional measuring machine stamp here on the side. We were able to also include the ink stamp on the keeper. And I've just realized I'm doing a poor job explaining these because all of these are different sizes and most of these are 1-of-1 pieces. So I should probably be explaining the sizes. Either way, you'll be able to see the size of each of these on our website, ashlandleather.com. Look under the limited releases. So for example, this belt is a size 38. And this is where it starts to get extra fun. I think this is what people are going to like the most. This is a piece of marbled green shell cordovan, and the marbled green shells sort of range in color from almost like a aqua blue down to a green, a little bit more forest green, and then orange in some spots, which I think is really, really interesting. This is a total stunner as well. Let me go back to the top end here to show you what it would look like. If you're looking for a green belt, this is probably the way to go. I've got a couple more marbled belts to show you. This one, I believe, is marbled color 8 shell cordovan. And marbled color 8 ranges from a burgundy down to a little bit more of like a medium brown, sometimes a little bit of orangey tan. Now this one is a size 34 for people looking for a 34. I think most of the belts in the drop today are size 36 or 38. And I have another marbled piece to show you. This is marbled cigar shell cordovan. And I noticed the marbled cigar is significantly different than the marbled color 8. The marbled cigar definitely reads as a little bit more brown, but then it has this sort of golden glow, almost like the whiskey shell cordovan color in some sections. So let me give you a better look at this color. You can see the range of color I'm talking about there, a little bit more golden on that piece. And then as it goes around, sort of transforms at different angles as well. So it's a really difficult color to capture. And I think the marbled cigar is one of my favorite marbled colors. And I mentioned this guy earlier, my favorite shell cordovan color. This is the Amaretto shell cordovan. We did a run of these maybe 1 or 2 years ago that people seem to really enjoy. I think we sold out of those pretty quickly. So we are planning to bring back shell cordovan belts as limited releases in more size runs. As you might imagine, we've been a little bit busy here during the holidays, so I haven't had too much of an opportunity to make new stock, but we do intend to start stocking shell cordovan belts in the black and color 8, which seem to be the most popular colors. So this Amero shell belt here is a size 38. You know, I have another marbled color 8 piece here. This will be worth looking at and opening up. So this marbled color 8 shell belt is a size 36 as well. And then let's take a look at the color. You can see it range a little bit more tan there, some hints of a burgundy, a little bit of brown and red, a little bit lighter and darker in certain spots. It's a really tough color to capture, especially because it changes depending upon which angle you look at it. And the last belt here is a super funky one. I was actually really surprised at how well this turned out. This is a size 42, and it's made in 3 different colors of shell cordovan. So the top piece here is whiskey shell cordovan. You'll notice that the next joint, I believe this is color 4 shell cordovan. And then as we get around to the end, this is color number 8 shell cordovan. So sort of a great opportunity to see the difference of color 4 and color 8 right next to each other. It's a totally awful name, especially on the internet where it has the pound sign in there. It's the official name, color 4 and color 8. Really, the old story was that the color 8 dye has twice as much stain concentration as the color 4. So in theory, they're roughly similar. It's just sort of half the darkness would be the color 4. So we're going to come back to this marbled green because I don't see a lot of marbled green shells in general. And I think this is the only marbled green shell belt that we've ever made. I really like the way that this one looks. So everything that we just looked at is up on our website, ashlandleather.com, on the limited release page, and you'll be able to find the sizes there. So like this marbled green was a 38. I think most of these are 36s and 38s with a few exceptions. Hopefully you enjoy looking at all these different leathers in these belts with me today as much as I do. And until next time, hope you have a good one and take care.